Hi, in this video we're going to be covering our add-on features that we've added to the Bake to Control rig as part of our Sequence Baker tool that we've made. So our first feature that we want to cover is our auto update from sequencer selection. So normally when you're baking to control rig, you have to look for a specific control rig and you have to make sure that it's the one that's associated with the skeletal mesh. Right now with this checkbox checked for the option here, if we select something from the sequencer, you'll see that the primary control rig here will auto update to the default rig associated with the skeletal mesh. So if we select something outside, it will deselect and you won't have a control rig. So this is really useful for determining which control rig you want to bake to by default when switching around in sequencer. If you don't want to bake to this control rig, for example, you can also uncheck this and then you can manually specify which control rig you want to bake against. So in this example, we're going to show some examples where we're going to bake against a separate control rig that potentially doesn't have a backward solve. For example, we're going to choose this basic foot IK. And if we try to do a bake here, you'll see that it'll warn you that it doesn't have a backward solve operation. So this will filter out and prevent you from baking out things that you cannot technically bake to. So we're going to choose a different one here as an example, maybe basic biped. And we're going to hit bake here, and then we will be able to bake down. So this visual discrepancy, just to be aware, this is actually part of the original control rig. If we baked to it normally, we would still get these visual discrepancies. This is not an artifact of the tool itself per se. So other features we want to cover as well is the ability to disable post-process blueprint. In many cases, when baking to control rig, this is not really too relevant. This is more apparent when we're working with anim sequences, but we still also included this feature in the control rig just in case this becomes an issue and when you are baking the control rig and you are getting inconsistent results. So we do have a separate video covering this from the scope of an anim sequence, so you can refer to that video for more details on when you would want to have this unchecked. Another feature that we've added is the ability to keep the animation track as active. So you can see that normally if we bake down to control rig, and we choose the body as an example, the control rig, the animation track will automatically be disabled when you bake to control rig. And a lot of the times you do want this active. And the reason is that there are control rigs that don't necessarily drive all the bones in the skeletal mesh that you have. So having animation run and then having the control rig override every other bone in forward solve that it needs to run is usually ideal to get the proper visual results that you are looking at for the final renders usually. So rather than having to enable this each time we bake the control rig, we have the option to keep it active whenever we do our bakes. So as an example here, we're going to bake down and we're going to keep this active here. All right. So two other features we're going to talk about together as an extra here now is the ability to trim the start and end section here. So normally if we did do a baked control rig, which we'll do here once more, and we'll activate it as an example, you'll see that the purple bar here is unbounded for the start and end, meaning that the control rig is active from negative infinity to positive infinity. Sometimes you do want this behavior, but a lot of times you probably don't want to, especially if you're working within a small subset of the range that you're working with. So for example, if you only want to, we're baking from 15 to 30 as an example, we might not want to have these ranges for the unbounded. So what we can do with this plugin is we can have these two checked off. And then when we do our bakes, which we'll do right now with selection here, you'll see that it's not running outside of this range. So it bounces back to the default. So where is this helpful is, for example, we're going to bake a subset of frames. So we're going to go from, let's say 15 to 30 as an example. And then we're going to do our bake here. And you can see that we've only baked down this range right here. But because we've only baked down this range and we don't have unbounded control rig area frames that goes to negative and positive infinity, we can reliably depend on the anim sequence to drive the frames before and after the control rig zone. So from here, if we wanted to do a more efficient bake that only covers the area we want to edit, we can bake down just these subset of frames, do our edits, and then export out another animation sequence, for example. So having this trimmed here is super useful and super quick to be able to bake faster and more contextual to what you're trying to edit in your control rig. And The last option here is the bake to all controls. We have a separate video that covers how to deal with control masking and what options you have to deal with one or two animations for control masking, or just to filter out controls. So take a look at that video as well for the full feature set of the bake to all controls optionality here. And that covers all of our features that we have customized and added on top of the default capabilities of Bake to Control Rig. Thanks.